Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the CPL Newsroom, brought to you by our friends at Volkswagen, the podcast talking all things Canadian Premier League. Kristian Jack here, alongside Charlie O'Connor-Clark for the next 45 minutes or so, as we recap week 25 in the CPL. It is October. The leaves are changing, the games are getting tighter, and it means just that little bit more. We also look forward to week 26, just 3 weeks more to go in the Canadian Premier League regular season. Scores from week 24, Forge 2, York United 0, goals from Noah Jensen and Nana Ampoma on Saturday. 0-0 in Calgary as between Cavalry and Vancouver. On Sunday, Atlético Ottawa let another lead slip as they draw 1-1 with Halifax Wanderers. 2 goals from 2 centre-backs, Benedict and Nazim Mekidesh. And on Monday night, football in Winnipeg, Kevin Tesseri own goal as Valour beat Pacific by 1-0. Yes, if you're counting, that's 3 goals from centre-backs this weekend. An unfortunate own goal in there included. We start this week's review from Monday Night Football in Winnipeg as Valour started the game in 8th position and 4 points back of their opponents, Pacific, who held and still do the 5th and final playoff spot. Philip Dos Santos' side have spent September scoring 1 goal per game and drawing each 1-1. This time, though, Charlie, they took the lead late, and through the nerves, they hung on for an enormous 3 points.
They certainly did. I mean, there's been several moments this season where this Valour team just, they just have a little bit of grit to get these kinds of results. I mean, I think that obviously we'll get to the fact that the next step for them will be picking up wins because they had so many draws. We see 4 draws in a row. And when you have a stretch like that, it's one of those where the 5th game, if it's a loss, then you're on a winless streak, and if it's a win, then you're on an unbeaten streak.
Right.
And I think we do have to look at it that way because they've lost 2 of their last 11. It's a team that, again, it's tough to say where exactly they would be if they've been playing like this all year. I still think that there's obvious gaps in the team. They're not scoring enough goals. They're not, finishing off results, but as they have been all year and really have been pretty much always under Phil Dos Santos since he's gotten there, prove that they're incredibly difficult to beat. And if you can't punish them for any of their mistakes and you make a mistake, then you are leaving Winnipeg with nothing. And I think that's pretty much just exactly the case of what happened here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you make there. I mean, in the end, they dance that fine line of football, right? That this crazy random sport that we all enjoy. It is often random, and they ride that line probably more than anybody else in terms of whether it can go well. But the other thing about them is that I don't think that they rarely hit rock bottom.
No.
Some teams will be really, what happened to them this week? That was really poor. We were just bigging up Pacific for a while, and that wasn't great. We'll get to them in a second. They were poor. But Valour rarely are poor. Sometimes they lose games because the other team's more talented, but we rarely come a Valour game, Charlie, and go, what happened to Valour? They didn't show up.
Yeah, I mean, we've only really seen them properly fall apart once this year, and that was in Ottawa.
Yes.
And I think other than that, like, I mean, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I can't think of a lot of moments where they've lost by 2 or 3 goals in league play. Like a lot of their defeats, especially on the road, they'll be tight. They'll make a team wait. It'll take until the second half for a team to get through on them. And at home, again, it's often not the prettiest. They're very rarely going to be accused of playing the most attractive football in the CPL. Yeah. But they have something about them that can get jobs done, especially can get draws, can make it difficult to beat them. And I think that is what's putting them, in a position where they are still alive this late in the season and very much have an opportunity.
Yeah, you mentioned that cup thrashing. This team looks very much different. I mean, that was on the back of playing a lot of games away from home early this season. There's a lot of issues with travel. No excuses, as Philip Dos Santos said, but that was time to dig deep and find out who the characters were on this team. And he picks pretty much the same players now. He knows he's got his group of 14, 15 that he can trust. And to that point, on July 18th, after a loss in Halifax, Valour had secured just 10 points from the first half of the CPL season, 14 games. They were last in the table. They were 9 points adrift of Pacific, who also had a game in hand. They have now, as you mentioned, Charlie, lost just 2 of 11 in the second half, and then now just 1 point back at Pacific with 3 to play. That was certainly on the mind of their head coach, Philip Dos Santos, after this one.
Look, I was reminded now that you lose 2 games in the last 11. That's the run of a team that is aspiring for higher positions in this league. But it's all about guys committing to the process, committing to what's on the line, enjoying it, doing it together. And I think that's what we have here. Our locker room has been unbelievable. How the guys just hold on to each other and they believe in each other. And it's not always pretty, but they know that they're in it together, and that for me is the biggest joy.
Just a quick one. The emotion on the touchline afterwards from Philip DeSantis and his coaching staff, you could just see what it means. You know, it almost brings me to tears connecting with these people. We've got connections, we've got relationships with these people, but they sacrifice so much to get this done. And when they can get 3 points like that, you can just feel like at least he could sleep a little bit better. Charlie, you've liked Valour for some time. There are 3 remaining games of this. Forge at home this weekend, Vancouver away, Cavalry at home. That's not easy. Are they favorites from the bottom 4 to clinch 5th or not?
It's hard to say that. You look at the bottom 4 and 3 of them have 2 home games left.
Right.
But I mean, Valour and Pacific both play Forge and Cavalry at home, which is tricky. Obviously we've spoken about Valour and how good they can be at home, especially against Forge, but I still wouldn't want to be playing Forge at the moment. We're obviously going to speak about them later. That game in Vancouver could be the make or break. I think it feels the way things are going out the second last week of the season, that could be a game that eliminates one of them realistically. So that'll end up being a must win. But I mean, we'll get to Vancouver as well. They have 2 of those must wins in a row pretty much here in Halifax and home to Valour. So I do think that Valour have a very good shot. And again, if they keep these games close, but they need to turn one of those into an actual win, especially the Vancouver one. You can't afford to be coming out with just a point. You need 3 in at least one of these games.
You do. Yeah, no doubt about it. Well said. It came on the 30th day of the month, but Pacific lose their first game of September and conclude a 3-game road trip to Halifax, Ottawa, and Winnipeg with just 2 points. Here are the thoughts of their skipper, Thomas Miajugia, after this one.
The road trip, it's not for sure. If we're talking about points, it's not great. It's 2 points on an opportunity of 9. It could have been better for sure, but I think we, like you said, 3-game away, big trip for us. Go to Ottawa, go to Halifax, get points at those games, big point, last minute goals and stuff. So I think we can be very proud of that. We're still I think we're still in the 5th position by 1 point. So it's still all in our hand, It's all in our hands. It's going to be 3 finals to finish the season, and I think the road trip was it's good. It's not bad. We have to be better, but it's okay. We'll be fine.
Thomas mentioned it there. They have 3 finals. Boy, oh boy, that's going to be an interesting run-in for them. Charlie, they missed Marco Dominguez through suspension. Cedric Toussaint came in. He got hurt. Pierre Lamotte came on for him and got sent off. What did we learn, if anything, from this defeat from the Tridents?
Well, I mean, we certainly learned that they're going to need a lot from like Sean Young next week in midfield if they're going to be missing so many of those players. I think to go back to what Mayor Gier was saying about the road trip, I think arguably the results they've had on this trip may in some cases flatter them, right? Because they were not very good in Halifax, especially on 9 men. Probably didn't deserve to win that game. They were all right in Ottawa. They got the job done again with that late equalizer, but still, not quite as impressive as they had been at home before they went on this road trip. And here in Valour, just again, it's a team that is struggling to put the ball in the net if it's not Moses Dyer jumping on the end of a cross or picking up a loose ball in the box. I mean, there needs to be other ways, and I do think that there is a lot of, obviously we've spoken all year about how much talent there is in this specific team. But again, this is a game where 38 entries into the final third, like that's not in the second half. That's not enough, I think, for a team that is trying to again win a game and put a direct rival to a playoff spot, away again. So yeah, full game, 70 final third entries, 19 touches in the box. That is not good enough. That implies that you are knocking the ball around the box and either giving it away or losing the ball before you actually get it on the foot or the head of a striker in the penalty area. And that's just been a problem for them all year.
It has been a problem, which speaks to the stat that is I think the most damning. They do not look confident, and you never believe in them when they go behind. They're the worst team in the CPL when they go behind. They've got just 2 points from from losing positions all year. Both gained this month, by the way, both through Moses Dyer goals. And he tried, he almost did it again. He hit the post. So it almost became Moses Dyer goal coming from behind again. But just a huge game next week against Cavalry. Then they get a longer break before ending at York on the 10th on that Thursday, and they finish at home to Forge, which a game Forge may not need at that point. So that might help them still if they could still be in it. We wrap up this one where we go back to Winnipeg, and here's the thoughts of Pacific head coach James Merriman.
Yeah, it's important to play in front of our fans, to give our fans the games that they want. We feel good there. We'll go home, we'll recover, and we know it's going to be a difficult match against Cavalry, but a game that we're going to need to win. We're going to need all points to make sure that we stay in that 5th spot.
Another side battling for the 5th and final playoff spot are the Halifax Wanderers. They were in the nation's capital on Sunday for a key clash, both sides needing to win for very different reasons. In the end, though, Charlie, this was a day where both were left feeling a little unsatisfied after a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think more so Ottawa will be unsatisfied with this game. You go ahead so early, and then you can't find a second goal through, I think, about 70 minutes. And then you give up that equalizer from a set piece at the very end. I think that is very, very frustrating if you're Carlos Gonzalez, if you're Atlético Ottawa. And again, it's something that we've spoken about many times with Atlético Ottawa. They score in the 4th minute with their 4th shot of the game, right? So they start very well. They start very aggressively. And then they don't have another shot until the 19th minute. And Halifax have 4 in that stretch after Ottawa have gone ahead. It is... it might say something about both teams that Halifax come alive a little bit after they're slapped in the face. They concede the early goal, but too many times this year we've seen Ottawa not go hunting for that second goal, or maybe wait too long to go hunting for that second goal, and it bites them so many times, especially here. A game where you're playing a team that's fighting for its life. They are going to try and score any kind of goal, to get anything ugly, any set piece, and you just leave the game open for them to do that. And it is what hurts them here. So I think probably more frustrated if you're Ottawa, even though Halifax are in a position where they need wins more than anything. But, again, you can see emotion when they do score, that they obviously remain very much alive. Yeah,
that Halifax team are tough, and they're mentally tough, and they believe. We'll get to them in a second. I'm not sure if this Ottawa team's tough enough. And I think that's a fair thing to say. We've all been left, and they talked about it on OneSoccer on the weekend, a little bit wanting more. No, this is, you mentioned it. What an incredible start. I'm sitting there watching the game going, this is the best I've seen them play for a long time.
Exactly.
The best I've seen them play for a long time. They had their opponent on the floor. Finish him off. It's the 4th time in the last 7 games where they've scored a goal in the first 5 minutes. 4th time in the last 7. They've won 2 of those 7 games. This is a team that's way too talented, with way too many good players with experience to let this continue to go on. And that's why Forge are going to win the Shield right now. That's why they're going to win the Shield next week, because in the next couple of weeks, because they've let them go. They've let them pull away. So they'll be very disappointed with that. And now, by the way, they should be in the top 2, and it should have been done. And now, if you don't get in the top 2, that is, as AGR wrote in our analysis, that's a huge difference between 2nd and 3rd. And they cannot afford to fall into the 3rd position and have to run that gauntlet. So I'd be very disappointed if I was an Atleti fan at the moment. I think the team's talented, and they continue to keep dropping points. So we'll keep an eye on that. As I said, they played really well in the first 25 minutes or so. But oh boy, they keep giving up leads. That's 4 leads in the last 5 games. 5 leads in the last 6, and they've dropped 17 points from winning positions. That's the league lead, tied with Valour, the aforementioned Valour. So 17 points dropped from winning positions this season. All on the mind of a very disgruntled and boss searching for answers after this one. Here's Carlos Gonzalez.
Very disappointing. I think that we did a pretty good first half, in which we dominated the game, in which we showed what we wanted to do. One against, we weren't capable of maintaining in the second half. I think that we can drag the positive things if we analyze the first half, but also there are negative things. Thinking on the second half, we have to analyze deeply what's going on. and why aren't we capable to maintain the good things that we are doing on the first halves?
Same questions we asked. That's the view from the dugout. What about from the pitch? Here's left back Matteo Di Brian.
Obviously, it's very disappointing, especially at home. It's like you said, back-to-back weeks where we go up and then we end up causing ourselves the game. It's a difficult situation to be in, obviously, at home, where this is our fortress, where we need to really dominate. And it's something that I feel after 45 minutes we aren't keeping each other accountable as a collective, which is kind of draining us a little bit.
Interesting comments. As for Halifax, the way they responded and figured out Atleti's style, particularly closing down the half spaces in the second half, I thought spoke very highly of Patrice Geyser, his coaching staff, and the mentality of those players. They could have won it. Again, another crucial headed set piece, just like last week in Winnipeg. Before Charlie gives some flowers to them, here's Patrice Geyser on Halifax's point.
It's very difficult for sure. You feel torn, but the one thing I just told the team, which I have no problem sharing with the entire country, is that I felt inspired by their performance. So I think you have to, for sure, recognize the performance. You have to recognize the effort and the intensity. So I think it's far from over. And I think that, sure, we're maybe a little bit late with the things that we're doing, but I'm proud of us doing it. So we maybe don't necessarily control our faith anymore, but one game at a time. And if there's something amazing about this league that I love, is that anyone can beat anyone any week. And all the teams that are fighting for that last spot are playing each other, including us playing Vancouver. So I think the message that we just showed everybody is that we're not afraid of anyone at any place. So we'll go for it one game at a time.
Don't look now, but they're in this, Charlie.
Very much so. Very much so. Perhaps surprisingly so, given where we thought they were even a couple weeks ago. But you look at they're 2 points out of the spot, and their run-in is 2 at home. I think it's against Vancouver and York, which are winnable games for them.
If they win them, that might be enough.
You asked me if Valour were the favorites to get into fifth place, but there's a strong argument that it's Halifax right now, even though they have not been winning a lot of games recently. Really, nobody has.
Right. But they are very good at home, right?
They are excellent at home. They are excellent at home, and that might be exactly what they need. I think these tough results on the road, again, even when things haven't been going great, games have been frustrating, they've been hanging in there. This game, they get that point at the end, and they, as you mentioned, they were very good. I think, especially in the second half. Cavalry was fantastic, created 5 chances, and he gets the assist. Ryan Telfer, I thought, was very good and kind of a bit of a more of a hold-up role than usual. He creates 4 chances, despite playing as a striker up top. And I think we really have to give some attention to Nassim Mekidesh, who's come in mid-season, basically signed for the club a day before he started because their 2 starting center backs were suspended. Starts that game, shuts out the top attack in the league against Forge, has since scored twice. Yeah, I believe both of them massive goals for this club, and he's been excellent. Coming in so quickly into a team where there have been defensive issues this year, has really in a way helped them turn things around in a very big way. So I think a lot of credit is to him for coming in, especially having not played a lot of football in the last year, and also to the club for identifying and bringing him in at this point in the year, because that has been very helpful.
Yeah, great. I love that thought about Mekidesh. I'm going to piggyback off your thought about, first of all, Telfer was excellent again. He doesn't get the goals always, but you watch the games, you can see what he does. Yeah. Lorenzo Cavalry might have been the best player in September in the Canadian Premier League. He might have been. He's taken it to another level. And when he's on, I don't know what's on that cast right now, but it's given him an extra superpower, I think, because it's great to watch. He's one of our favorites to watch. I think we should be pretty blessed to have a player of that caliber and his experience, and obviously his resume coming to the Canadian Premier League. It's not always been easy in that system to play and dictate. And I know they've had a little bit of issues and suspensions and different things to play with, and who you're going to play midfield. But I mean, when he's on, the balls, the vision, just the calmness he can take out of a game, and he ran that game in the second half, completely ran the game, and that's what Atlético Ottawa don't have. They have a lot of good players. They just don't have that guy who can just control a game from midfield and pin a pass here or there, take the sting out of the game, go up the gears when he needs to, lower the gear when he needs to, dictate it, and be brilliant from set pieces. And it makes a huge difference. He's the X factor right now for them, and he's been class. Another player who was very good, welcome back to the team as well after a couple of games with suspension, was centre-back Dan Nimick. Let's get some players' perspective from the Halifax point of view from the centre-back.
Yeah, I'd say happy with the second half. I think we regrouped at halftime. It was definitely a rough first half. We struggled to figure out our press. They had a few chances off set pieces. They scored that early goal, but I think the team showed good concentration and fight to stay in that first half. And then obviously we regrouped at halftime, came out flying in the second half, got one back. We would argue the other one we scored shouldn't have been disallowed, but we created other chances as well that we could have scored. So yeah, proud of the fight, proud of the response, but need 3 points at this point in the season.
They'll go to hunt for those 3 points at home in an enormous game this weekend against Vancouver. They finish at home to York, and in the middle is a trip out to Calgary. That is the run-in for the Wanderers. Speaking of Cavalry, the late game on Saturday came in Alberta, where many expected Cavalry to continue their impressive form against a Vancouver side that had lost 4 in a row. What we saw, though, Charlie, was a resilient Vancouver finally getting their first point of the month.
Yeah, I think probably the positive story from this game is Vancouver being quite pragmatic. I think, maybe kind of a wiser approach to this game than maybe trying to stretch it out and understanding. I think the Cavalry are in good form, are very, very dangerous, have a lot of difference makers. So I think Vancouver coming into this game, kind of suffocating a lot of those players out of the game, I think was quite a good choice. I think we look at James Cameron at left back, I think is a big story of this game because he has a very difficult job on the same side as Ali Musi, one of the toughest assignments in the entire Canadian Premier League. And, I think generally Vancouver, while they don't have, they don't necessarily have a lot of attacking opportunities, I think they did exactly what they needed to do to pick up a very important clean sheet with some obviously help from Callum Irving. Cavalry came fairly close a couple times to some fairly special goals, but the fact that they had to try those from those kinds of areas meant that they weren't getting into the actually, the higher quality, the high danger areas because Vancouver was keeping them out. So I think the positive credit goes to Vancouver, and Cavalry, meanwhile, just I think a little frustrated at times. Again, you look at multiple players attempting bicycle kicks is not the mark of a team that feels like it's creating a lot of high quality chances. It feels like a team that's trying to force things a little bit. So I do think they're a little bit frustrated, and I think getting in their heads a little bit. You see the very end of the game, there was I think Camargo comes into the box. He goes down. I don't think it was a penalty, but I think 4 or 5 Cavalry players have their hands up while Vancouver is running back the other end on a counterattack. That is maybe the mark of a slightly frustrated team that I think just wasn't able to solve a Vancouver side that's set up, to keep a clean sheet.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll get back to the Cavs in a second. Let's go with Vancouver first, though. It's the first draw for 2 months. They're still now just 1 point back of Pacific with 3 to play.
Mm-hmm.
Before we talk about their opportunities to reach the postseason, let's hear from their gaffer. Here's Ashton Gotby after this one.
Obviously, we've had a few very poor weeks in results, and we came here to try to change kind of our destiny and trying to be in the competition in the remaining games that are left. So we came in the first half hoping to have a very good defensive structure, limit the number of chances, make it very difficult for Calgary to come into the right positions, and I think we're very successful. At the same time, we tried to stage some counterattacks and get some early crosses in, and unfortunately, we failed in that part. I thought in the second half, as you saw with the substitutions, I gradually try to bring more attacking players and hoping that we can steal a victory. So I'm really proud of the commitment, the grit, and also the discipline we showed, especially in the defensive part. We have to improve in the attacking part, especially if we want to continue playing this way in some of the road matches ahead of us. But a point was a fair point, and I'm hoping that that gives the players confidence moving forward.
Another great thing about Ashvin is he's always honest. He basically just gave us the game plan and the reason why they went there to try and stay in the conversation.
Mhm.
I think if you'd offered him a 0-0 at the start of the game, they would have just gone right back to the airport, Charlie.
Exactly.
And it's probably also the game plan we should expect maybe this week in Halifax, because again, if they can get that point and just stay in the conversation, as you alluded to, it's all pointing to that penultimate game against Valour. Their running is Halifax away, Valour at home, and they end in Ottawa, where maybe they need it, maybe they won't, but Ottawa at that point. So I think maybe it's for Vancouver, it's just trying to stay alive as long as possible. What chance here?
Definitely still a major chance. I think you're right that the game in Ottawa, a draw would be much more disastrous for Halifax than Vancouver. But as long as they come home and beat Valour the next week, I think that's what they'll have kind of their eye on. It's obviously a very long travel from Vancouver to Halifax, and a game where it will be difficult against a very a Halifax team trying very desperately to win. They will not be interested in a draw, which when that's coming can sometimes make it easier to adjust to that and play for to try and neutralize them. And I think again this is going to be a game where they are going to want to offer a little bit more on the counter, threaten a little bit more. Vancouver only had one touch in the box against Cavalry, and I actually had to check it several times because I couldn't believe it was just one. But I think Halifax probably opened themselves up more to those kinds of opportunities, maybe, especially if they are going to be a little bit more aggressive playing at home, trying to score, trying to get forward. But I do think that there is something in this for Vancouver, and they're very, very much alive. We just need to see some of these difference makers do what they're meant to do. We need, Iman Salouf comes off the bench in this game. He's had some big moments already for this club. This would be a great moment for another one. Gabby Bitar also comes off the bench in Calgary. Mickey Kentav, even Austin Ricci, who has just come into the side and had some quite good performances. I think he's a player who has hurt Halifax in the past and could be, a slightly different kind of difference maker, especially if they are looking to counterattack, because he's a player who can be very effective there.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, no goals in 7 for Diaz now. He had scored, I think, 4 and 6 prior to that run. So you feel like at some point he's going to get one, and he got one last time in Halifax as well, albeit in a losing effort. You mentioned some of the players there. James Cameron was excellent. We put him in the team of the week on the right side just to get him in. Trust me, we knew he'd play on the left, and he was brilliant. And the other thing I want to give some props to is Callum Irving.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a personality of Callum to be able to be in a team like that where he's peppered with shots consistently. He leads the league in saves. And I always see that his body language is always positive. And some goalies, I think, wouldn't have that kind of mentality. And I think that sets the tone for this team, is that he's never too high, he's never too low. He's a phenomenal leader. And he understands that at times the game is going to get tough, and they need him. And he takes that responsibility on and never passes it off, Charlie. And I think that he's been an enormous part of this team this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Callum has been kind of the heart and soul of that club since day one, obviously the day one captain. But, I think we've seen, especially this year, that he is genuinely the leader of that team. You see him knock it down, but he also is showing it on the pitch. There's been some tougher moments. He himself has had some down games this year, but we see nights like this in Cavalry where he knows what kind of game it's going to be. He knows he has to deliver his best, and he does. And I think that does, give additional confidence to the rest of the team in front of him, especially the back line. Because if you're a defender, you always feel better about marking and not jumping into tackles if you know that your goalkeeper's got it, if somebody does get around you. So I do think that is a huge part of why they're able to keep a clean sheet in this match.
Yeah, and in a highly volatile game and in a quite emotional dressing room, I think he has become very important within that. Of course, we knew that, though, from day one. Cavalry completed a mixed September where they would lose at Forge, draw in Ottawa after being behind twice, win at York pretty comprehensively, and then draw in this one. So a mixed bag. Let's hear from their skipper, his goalkeeper, Marco Carducci.
Honestly, I think right now we're obviously a bit disappointed we didn't win tonight. I think we created enough chances to do that, so that was our first focus, was winning. So there's a bit of disappointment there, but of course, we know the playoff system, so getting in is what counts at the end of the day. We did enough to do that, which we'll obviously enjoy that, but there's still a lot to go in terms of seeding and all that. So Yeah, on one hand, a bit disappointed about the outcome because I think we could have come away with 3 points, absolutely. But, and the team feels that. But yeah, job done in terms of getting playoffs clinched.
They did punch their playoff ticket, as did York a day later following the results this weekend. 12 draws, Cavalry, by the way, now. That ties York from 2021 for the most ever. Do we have concerns about this team? You mentioned a little bit of the adversity with the Camargo issue that they could have lost on the week at the end of the game. Yeah. Mentally, do we need to figure out how they can be tougher? I think now it just comes down to they've got to think, how can we beat Forge? And they may have to play them twice. So potentially it might even be better, Charlie, to think maybe third might be better than second in this run for them.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly wouldn't tell you that, but there is an argument. I do think that they have had, and again, they wouldn't tell you this, but I think they might have had an eye on the playoffs all year. Yeah, they did the Shield last year. They know they proved last year that they can run away with a league title, which they absolutely did. This year, certainly they haven't been at that level very often. There have been lots of injuries and things like that. But I do think in games like this, and I think some of the players, Marco Carducci said it at one point, I think in his post-match press conference, they are preparing for knockout football. And I think when you can keep a game close like this, obviously you need to finish your chances. You need to you need to make that draw into a win. But in the playoffs, you can do it over 120 minutes. They're very tough to beat. That's I think the main thing, and I think genuinely they do have a bit of an eye on, okay, how do we especially beat Forge? How do we win whatever we need to in the playoffs? Because they, I think more than anything in the world, want to win the North Star Cup this year. No matter where they finish in the table. Yeah,
and I think that mental edge is there for them to just continue to move forward. And congratulations to Tommy's brother Jay Wielden, who got married on Sunday as well.
Yeah,
so that was a special weekend for the brilliant Wielden family, and now they turn the calendar to October. And of course, as he said to me last week in our interview that you can catch all across CPL socials, it's nice to be in the conversation. And with more, let's go back and listen to what Tommy Wielden had to say after this one.
Well, until it's mathematically done, we're still in the competition. So I think we've still got 9 points on the table, and we'll chase those 9 points until we're out of the race. So that'll be our first focus. And then the second focus now will be playoffs. And just keep playing. Just keep playing. We've got a good team, terrific lads. They'll score goals. We'll defend goals. I think we've kept the most amount of clean sheets. And I think sometimes defense wins championships.
Speaking about exactly what we were just talking about there. The late game on Saturday did happen in Calgary, but the earlier game was a big one that they had on as well, and that came in Hamilton in the 905 derby. Charlie and I were there for this one. York entered the game without a goal in 3 previous meetings with their local rivals in 2024 in the league, and would leave it still without a goal as Forge reigned supreme in the rain, Charlie.
Yeah, and it did look like it was raining quite horribly in the second half, so I was glad I wasn't standing out in it. Sorry. I know you were. But this was an interesting game, and I think we knew it was going to be weird from the moment the team sheets dropped. To start with York, they did not have a defender in the team. They had Elijah Adecubi and Matthew Baldissimo playing center back with Leon suspended and Abatne and Frank Stirring still injured. They have Cordova and Kembo Kibato playing at fullback. It was just kind of a makeshift team from York, who I think we'll probably get into them more in a little bit, but they were not bad in the first half. I think they were quite happy with the circumstances and how they defended Forge, but then obviously Forge do find the moments to get behind them twice in the second half. The first one, Kyle Becker and Noah Jensen combining. I think I looked it up. They've only started together 4 times this year. It's not very often. I think it's 13 times all time, since Jensen signed for Forge. But they have, I think, scored like 25 goals in that time as a team in those games. They're 2 players that are. Sorry?
And you said they've only lost once, you wrote.
Yes, they've only lost one, and that was a 3-0 in Ottawa, where I think there were other reasons they lost that game. The game in Montreal a few days before probably being the main one. But yeah, they've been very, very good together. And we talked to Bobby about it after the game. It's just 2 players who know their roles so well. They are a little bit similar, so it's hard to get them in the same team, but you can see that they are on the same page so well. Kyle Becker brings the ball down by the box, brings it in, and Jensen just arrives in perfect time at the back post for a finish that I think is more difficult than I think he's given credit for. It's a tough angle. And again, just Forge kind of controlled this game in midfield against a York side who are missing, they've got two of their midfielders playing at center back. So, it's not quite the midfield that they would normally want to go with. But anyway, it's a Forge team that, again, just is patient. They wait for their moment, they find it, and they look very comfortable. And that's why they've already got pretty much one hand on the shield.
Yeah, it's a brilliant midfield. When you put Jensen in there Borges was hurt, and you can just put Jensen in there to start, and you've got Jabraport and Becker. There probably is no, more adjectives left to describe what Kyle Becker's doing in the Canadian Premier League, Charlie. There's no one like him in the league in the way he dictates the games, leads the team forward, his mentality. His left foot is absolutely incredibly dangerous, just as good as his right. He can take set pieces with both. It's a brilliant left foot cross. He reads the game well. There's a lot of tactical elements to this game that Bobby Smirniotis was talking about, and the way that they adapt. They've got coaches on the pitch. And that's really important. We'll get more into that in a second. Let's go back to Tim Hortons Field, and after this one, let's hear from their head coach. Here's Bobby Smirniotis.
We needed to work for it. York came out and they were missing guys, and one of the messages to the players in the week, because we knew they were missing players, is you're probably going to face a team that's going to be more concentrated than usual, like those situations where you play against somebody who's down a man, because you see that there was players out of position, but they came up with a plan, played a little bit of a higher line, and sometimes that higher line, it's something easy to beat at U10. And I'm being honest with that. The problem is we're not 10 years old, and we sometimes try and play too much football to get around it when there was an easier route to get there. That's how we've scored our goals. That's how we've created our very good situations to score, but we needed to do a little bit more. They came out with a plan that we were prepared for, but sometimes it's difficult for a team to execute when you don't see that much. Usually we see a lower block, a lower line. Credit to York, they changed that up, but we had to work hard for it.
Charlie, Bobby talked once again there about how adaptable and flexible Forge can be on the field. I said it earlier, they've got coaches on the field, and it feels like they can change. They win a lot, we know this, but how flexible they are and can change says a lot.
Yeah, it does. And I think we see them kind of evolve throughout the second half of this game with some of the changes that Bobby made. He obviously brings Nana Ampoma on at halftime for Jordan Hamilton. He starts playing kind of up top. Later, when they bring Victor Klonaridis in, I think he kind of shifts the middle, and Nana kind of shifts a little bit more to the outside, and you just see them kind of interchanging with each other. All of these players, it's not just that they know a tactical blueprint, and this is something Bobby Smirniotis says a lot. It's not just that they know where they're instructed to be at any one time. They know what to do if they find themselves in a different place. If you find yourself in transition, a broken play, out of position, they know what the smartest thing to do for the kind of broader picture of what they want to be is. And we see it so many times, especially on the counterattack with this team. And it's why they're so dangerous in so many different ways, is most players on the pitch for Forge, and it's a credit to their recruitment and their training. These players are able to sub in at different positions at times. If somebody gets caught on a corner, they can step in at right back for a few minutes while somebody else is going for a walk. Alex Ashnioti-Janssen is off for a stroll through midfield on the counterattack before their second goal. And it's not unnatural at all. It's kind of where he belongs.
Yeah,
you would kind of expect to see something like that.
He was excellent too,
he was.
Yeah.
He always is, and I think he doesn't get very much. We don't talk about him a lot this year, but it's just because he's so quietly excellent that it's not really news anymore.
Brian Wright got nothing out of him, and Brian Wright's in the conversation to lead the league in goals.
Exactly. And it's a Forge team where just everybody knows their role at all times, and then they pretty much know everybody else's role as well, so they can step in whenever they need it. It's a Forge team that's so organic and natural that it's very, very difficult to find holes in it.
Yeah, certainly is. Before we get on to York, let's go back to Forge and hear from their player perspective. Here's goal scorer, midfielder Noah Jensen.
Yeah, I think especially at the start, it was a little bit difficult to find out how we were going to have success in the game. But playing them with a guy like Bex, that he's always going to be a guy that's going to be able to find the way to unlock defenses, and we all know that So to get a goal in the second half from one of his crosses was great for us as a team. But ultimately, regardless of who we're playing or what system they're playing, we know that we have the guys that are able to solve these problems on the pitch. He's one of them. Ali's one of them. And I'm really lucky to play alongside guys like that because, it makes putting the ball in the back of the net a lot easier.
The win means Forge have 2 opportunities to secure the league title as early as Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern in Winnipeg. A win for Forge, and they've done it. They've secured the Shield. If they don't win that game, they'll be watching the next game, particularly as they fly home. And if Atlético Ottawa don't win at York on Sunday, later in that day, they will still clinch the Shield that day. Either way, Forge fans, it's time to get your tickets for the home game on the 12th against Atlético Ottawa, where a Shield lift that day is now looking very likely. As for York, no real defenders in the team, as Charlie alluded to. A ton of injuries and suspensions, and it got worse. By the way, Mo Babouli got hurt in the game. Juan Cordova got a yellow card with the last action of the match and will now be suspended for next week. But Benjamin Mora, the coach, was not too down after this one.
Yeah.
It never went wrong. I don't know what you mean on wrong. If you talk about the goals, yeah, well, it was an action that we conceded. It was fast. It was a run behind from Becker that we know his capacity, we know his skills, and we couldn't stop the cross. And then from there, it was the first goal. And the second goal was a counterattack. The second goal was very fast. It was a counterattack. We were trying to get the equalizer, things that happen in football. But the team never unshaped. The team never stopped running. The team never stopped fighting. The team never stopped believing that they could get one goal in order to continue the fight. The first half was amazing. The second half started well, and well, we did what we could. We fought. There's many phases of the game. For offensive, defensive, transitions, set pieces. And I think in the 5 phases of the game, we did a good job. It was not enough. Forge is the first place in the table. They are contenders to be champions again, of course. We all know that. And we are a small team with a dream to come and fight and try to do our best with the players that we had, that were players that hadn't had a lot of minutes. And I don't have any excuse about anything. We did our best with what we had, and we fought. I think we did it with dignity. Yes.
A small team with a dream. Charlie, thoughts on that?
Yeah, York were dealt a very tough hand for this game. The suspensions to Osvaldo Leon, Orlando Boteo, and Jorge Guzman, plus injuries to Stirring and Abatne, and I think several others around the pitch. It was not easy for them to go to Tim Hortons Field and put together an 11 that could compete with them, but they did. I Mora hinted earlier in the week that they would make changes, that Kembo Kibato would come in at left back for I think his first start with the club since he arrived from Vancouver, where he'd played pretty much exclusively in midfield. That was a bit of a surprise, and I think more than anything, Mora learned a bit about a lot of his players in this game. He learned about Adekubi and Baldissimo. Baldissimo, by the way, had barely played in the last few months, and to come in and play center back against Forge is an insanely difficult ask for your, I think your first start back since I think the last time York played at Forge. I think they set up well. They were well organized in that kind of 4-1 in defense, especially in the first half. Bobby Smirniotis mentioned it earlier that they weren't as deep as I think he expected them to be. Their line was a little bit higher than he expected at times, and I think that made it very difficult for Forge at times, especially in the first half. They obviously find their way in behind it twice eventually, but I do think that York did have the advantage of really nobody knowing what they're going to be able to do in this game. Certainly they'll feel a bit of a shame that they couldn't put a ball on the net. Obviously, I think Shola Jimo hit the post or the crossbar in the first half with one of those.
He was good.
He was excellent. And I think a lot of credit is due to York for this game, even though it was one where it felt unlikely that they were going to be able to win this one. So I think to hang in for as long as they did, obviously you're disappointed that you don't get anything from it. But I do think that from a coaching perspective, you've learned a lot about several of your players and how they can maybe adapt, and you can play them in different roles if you need to.
Certainly, definitely still positive. And as I said earlier, they clinched their playoff spot for the third time in their past 4 seasons. So that's something to look forward to and still have a chance, I think, to try and get out of that 4-5 game. That's got to now be the priority for the Nine Stripes in their last 3 games. That concludes week 25. So let's take a look at the league table and the standings. Forge on 47 from 25, as mentioned, very close to the Shield. 7 points adrift. Atlético Ottawa 40 from 25. Cavalry 39 from 25. York 36 from 25. 4 teams in, 1 team out of the bottom 4 to make it to the playoffs. Pacific continue to still have it controlling their own destiny. 28 points from 25. Vancouver 27 from 25. Valour 27 from 25. And Halifax 26 from 25. It is ridiculously close, down to 2 points at the bottom there. 100 games down, 12 to go in the 2024 regular season. We go again with a doubleheader starting on Saturday, where a team kicking off at 3 p.m. local goes before a side starting at 2 p.m. local. The beauty of Canada. Halifax take on Vancouver at 3 p.m. local time, followed by Pacific versus Cavalry at 2 p.m. on Vancouver Island at Starlight Stadium. Sunday's doubleheader starts in Winnipeg at 1 p.m. in Manitoba as Valour welcomes Forge, and the Tony Bet match of the week is at York as they welcome Atlético Ottawa for a 5 p.m. kickoff. OneSoccer's live studio show, by the way, starts at 4 immediately following the action in Winnipeg, where Forge may just have clinched a title. Just a little time left now, so we'll bring in producer Benedict Rhodes to join us for the weekly segment known as Stoppage Time. Benny, great to see you. Still awake after a late night that we're all working, but you worked harder than anybody in Winnipeg. I appreciate you as ever. What do you got this week as questions for us?
Yes, I had an interesting conversation with Thomas Meyer-Jaguar on Friday about, what is the best CPL team of all time. Like, obviously, I asked him about 2021 Pacific FC, all the great players out on that team, but he mentioned 2021 Forge as well, the only time Forge didn't win a trophy, funnily enough.
Yeah.
But I just want to know what you guys think. What is the best single-season CPL team of all time, and is there a case to be made that it is 2024 Forge FC?
Wow, what a question. Charlie, you got an answer
I
for
love this. Okay, so there's several ways to look at it.
Several ways to look at this.
Are we looking at which team performed the best over a regular season? In which case, it's Cavalry in 2019. They were, no team has ever been that dominant, and I think they had 60-something points over 28 games. But I think back to that 2021 Pacific team a lot. I think I spoke about it with Callum Irving fairly recently. You look at the lineups for the final, they beat Forge and the players that weren't on the pitch: Marco Bustos, Alejandro Diaz, Kunle Dadaluke, Sean Young, Ollie Bassett, all these players. Isaac Bomer was on the bench. He was a character recently in Canadian soccer circles.
Yeah.
On OneSoccer, but no, on the field they had Aparicio, Hurd, Taryn Campbell, Meyer-Jaguar, Lucas McNaughton, Caden Chung, and Callum Irving. That is an incredible football team of players who have gone on to do very, very good things. Largely not necessarily at Pacific, to be fair, but players that I think have had very, very good careers. And I just think of all the talent that was in that team, and it was a fun team to watch. I think more like that. They're very entertaining.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Cavalry last season, to think about what they were able to accomplish, they need to be in the conversation as well.
Yeah.
Just the run that they were on and how good Carducci and Musi and Klomp were. They deserve that conversation. And I think this Forge team will have that conversation. It's just very difficult when you're in it to actually put a bow on it all, right? Like the present's not fully wrapped yet, right? We're still, we're still getting the paper out, and we're still figuring out, what's going to be part of this team and what actually is the package. So I'm going to give a shout for the 2021 Forge team as well, because that team, I still think Daniel Krutzen's probably one of the best, if not the best defender to ever play in the Canadian Premier League. The elegance that they had in that team with Jonsson, Cisse in his full pomp, and we really, we send our wishes to him after he got injured in the game on the weekend, and we don't know the full extent of that, but we send him the wishes. But Booley was in that team as well, and what they had to accomplish in a short season by getting to the semifinals of CONCACAF League, playing the semifinal in Honduras, and then coming back and playing a final 4 days later that they almost won as well. I think they got 50 points in the regular season. As I mentioned, Kristian and Jonsson and Cisse and Becker. So there was a lot to like about that team as well. And of course, there's still the usual Schwanya and the rest. So I'll throw that one out as well, Benedict. But I don't think we really answered your question, but maybe Charlie did, but I didn't.
I think you both answered it admirably. I think 2021 Pacific as well, just on terms of how the roster is built. Incredible. But also, the next year, Ottawa 2022, Ollie Bassett goes to Ottawa and they win the first CPL Shield, and Valour Tableau's on that team as well. And maybe not the best team, but they had the best season. And Ollie Bassett, of course, had his emergence in the CPL.
Yeah, I like that.
Last week, we talked about the best newcomer for the CPL, and this week let's do another sort of fictional CPL award and do the best comeback player of the year. Who do you think has had the best year this year? Who maybe in 2023 didn't live up to the expectations, but has bounced back this year?
So I was thinking about this one, and I don't know if this is the best time to be naming this player given the last few weeks, but I think it's Brian Wright.
It is Brian Wright. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be. He had a very tough year last year in his first year at York, and this year leads the team in goals and assists and remains in the Golden Boot hunt. If he hadn't got hurt, he might have been even more, effective in that Golden Boot hunt. So I think that has to be the answer. I'm struggling to think of a lot of.
I think it is Brian Wright. The other one I would throw out there is Tristan Borges, who was not himself last year, and worked his way out of the starting 11. He was not a starter in the best team last year. It gets forgotten about because of the impact that he made in the final with the Olympico, but he was not part of the best 11 last year, and nowhere near in a conversation for individual awards. And he's winning individual awards, monthly awards now. He's 7 goals, 5 assists. He could be player of the year, certainly in the conversation. So I'd say someone like Borges as well has done a huge amount to turn around his career in 2024.
One other shout that's just come to mind, and this might be harsh on last year for him, but there were certainly tough moments early in the year. But Emil Gazdov, he has been outstanding, I think, for Pacific largely this year. His second half of last season was much better than the first half, but we all remember him having some very tough moments. Again, losing his starting job, Kieran Basket, kind of winning it back. But this year he has been nailed on the starter at Pacific and been one of the best goalkeepers in the CPL. So I think he's another one that deserves some credit.
I like that.
Yeah, I was going to say Gazdov as well. I think last year he lost his job twice, I believe. He lost his job and got it back. And this year, like you said, Charlie, he's been maybe a goalkeeper of the year candidate, definitely an under 21 player of the year candidate, and a huge player for them. Last question. There's 4 big games. I'll rip the graphic again. Other than Forge and Cavalry, Forge and Valour on Sunday for potential CPL Shield clincher, what do you think is the biggest game this weekend in terms of the impact it could have on both teams' season?
Charlie, you want to pick one first? I'll let you go first.
I think it has to be Halifax Vancouver, right? That's the most, to use the cliche, the most 6-point game I think we've got here. If one of those teams wins that game, they're pretty much in pole position to finish 5th, and whichever team loses is in a bit of a hole. So I think that's the one that can definitely shift the tides the most.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I'll take, I'll say York versus Atlético Ottawa for one reason. Last year, this team came into York Lions Stadium on the back of a consistent poor run of the same things happening over and over again. And at that time, they weren't in the playoffs, but at that time, it was conceding goals late. At this time, they are in the playoffs, but this time it's conceding goals when they're winning. So they've got to change that trend pretty quickly. I expect a great fan base coming down the highway again. They always travel well with their supporters. It's an enormous game for them to figure out who they are and what they can become. We don't know what Cavalry will do the day before, but by then they may be 3rd. And as alluded to it, Forge may have won a Shield. This is now about Ottawa versus Ottawa for the next few weeks for me.
I'll sort of round things off, I guess, with the other game, Pacific and Cavalry. I think I'm assigned to that game as well, which is exciting. But Cavalry, they need to potentially get to the top 2, and Pacific desperate to hold on to that 5th spot. They have a chance as well to maybe dictate what happens on Sunday with, Valour playing on Sunday, and depending on what happens on Saturday, that could be a game where Valour could jump over the playoff line. So I think the pressure's on Pacific to form at home and Cavalry to potentially climb back into the top 2.
That's a good point. Pacific have had a game in hand, and they've been playing different schedules, and they've been chasing the tail of some teams, and now they get to play their first chess move this week before others. So that'll be good. As usual, Benny, thank you so much for everything in this show and everything that you do. And to you, Charlie, for your great work, where you can always read at campl.ca. What a great time of season. It doesn't get much better. It's October. The season ends in 19 days, and then we're into the playoffs as well. Thanks to you, everybody, for listening. Enjoy the games this week, and we'll catch you next week.